check out our streaming schedule for this week. We've got tons of content in terms of the NFL and college football, as we're going live just about every single day this week. So make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single moment where we go live. And now, on with our feature presentation. If you recall the last video that I put out on this channel, I talked about the 1996 NFC Championship between these two teams, the Carolina Panthers and the Green Bay Packers. During that game, the Milwaukee Bucks of the NBA realized that there might be a massive scheduling conflict, because even though their games started at 6 o'clock and the NFC Championship was at 11:30, so there was plenty of time in between the two games, the Bucks realized that some people might try and go to both games and wouldn't be able to. Or some people would want to sit at home if the Packers won and would want to watch the AFC Championship at 3 o'clock to find out who the opponent was, not caring about the Bucks game. So because of this, the Bucks switched the start time of their game to 1 hour later at 7 o'clock, allowing for fans to indulge in football and still make it to the Bradley Center on time to watch the Bucks play. The strategy didn't entirely work. The game drew roughly 13,000 fans to the arena, which was on the lower end, because watching the Packers play, celebrating the Packers win, and going out to watch a basketball game afterwards was a bit too much for people to do. However, at least one NBA team realized that they had no chance of competing against the local NFL team one game away from the Super Bowl, even if said local team was 2 hours away. And they tried to address the problem. Because the story we're going to talk about today, yeah, that team did not do that. But before I talk about what exactly that team in question did, if you want to know more about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL and some other bizarre scheduling conflicts that have come up, then this is the place for you. Because we talk about all things NFL history all the time with a new video and a new live stream every single day. So if you like that sort of stuff, then be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Thanks in advance for your support as we try and hit 70,000 subscribers. Because in light of that, I want you to imagine a team completely doubling down on the fact that their local team is in the NFC Championship and thinking that it's no big deal. Not only do they recognize the problem, but they refuse to do anything about it, even though it is well within their power to do so, and it ends in predictable disaster. Because this game right here is the 1987 NFC Championship between Washington and Minnesota. And while one Washington team was playing for everything, at the exact same time, another Washington team was trying to play for something and was failing in absolutely spectacular fashion. Because this is the story behind the Washington Bullets, and the time they went up against the NFC Championship and fell flat on their face. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and what exactly the Washington Bullets did that went about as well as you could expect, we need some context to understand how the game itself went that was the clear marquee event in the nation's capital that day. It's January 17th, 1988, and we find ourselves at RFK Stadium for a battle between Washington and Minnesota. The winner of this game goes to San Diego to play in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks. For Washington, it would be their 4th ever trip to the big game and their 3rd trip there in the last 6 seasons. While for Minnesota, it'd be their 1st trip in over a decade and their 5th trip in franchise history. Neither team was expected to make it to this point. Washington had quarterback issues galore and had a quarterback controversy entering the postseason, while Minnesota entered the playoffs at 8-7 with a point differential of +1, with some calling them the worst team to ever make it to a regular, non-expanded playoff field. However, after Washington and Minnesota shocked a ton of people, with Minnesota pulling off one of the craziest upsets in NFL history by defeating the 11-point favorite San Francisco 49ers on the road, and Washington going on the road to defeat Chicago, this was your NFC Championship matchup, with a spot in the Super Bowl on the line. And we can talk for a long time about this game, because it truly was a close, competitive matchup. Washington ended up winning it 17-10, with Gary Clark scoring on a 7-yard touchdown pass from Doug Williams from 5 yards out, with just 5 minutes to go in the contest to give them a 7-point lead. And then, with Darren Nelson, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, dropping a huge pass on 4th down in the end zone that would have tied the game with a minute to go. Nelson's drop set Washington to the Super Bowl. That would be another moment in what turned out to be a fair amount of heartbreaking NFC Championship moments for the Vikes. Heck, I don't even think that drop is the most heartbreaking thing to happen to the Vikings in the NFC Championship. as it might be a distant third behind Gary Anderson's missed kick in 1998 and Brett Favre's interception in 2009. Having said that, Washington was on to the Super Bowl, and as we'd later find out in the day, they take on Denver after they won in heartbreaking fashion following an Ernest Biner fumble for Cleveland. A crazy good day of conference championships, followed up by a rather crap Super Bowl, but that's beside the point. The point is that this game right here was the center point for the nation's capital. Football is the most popular sport in the country, and the NFL is the most popular league out there. If you're trying to throw an event at the same time as the conference championship, and said event is in the same exact city as the game's location, then good luck. And that takes us to another sporting event taking place in Washington, D.C. on the same day at the same exact time. Because during the second half, you had the opening tip-off of a battle in the NBA between the Washington Bullets and the Sacramento Kings. There are no highlights of this game available, which should not be shocking to anyone. However, this game was between a Kings team that was 9-25 and a Bullets team that was 11-20 and had just fired its coach. Absolutely riveting stuff. Two teams with a combined winning percentage of 30%. This is like if today, the New Orleans Saints were playing in the NFC Championship at home, and right across the street at the exact same time, the New Orleans Pelicans were hosting the Brooklyn Nets. While the NFC Championship was a riveting game with a lot on the line, the random NBA game between the Kings and the Bullets was not that, as the Bullets won 130-113 thanks to 28 points by Bernard King. However, throughout all of that, you have to keep in mind that the Bullets could have rescheduled the game for later in the night. There was nothing stopping them from doing so. They already moved the game once to later in the day. The Kings-Bullets game was originally scheduled for a 1 o'clock tip, but it got moved to 3 o'clock because on Saturday night at the Capitol Center, there was a truck and tractor pull show. And the arena crew realized that they might need a little more time to clean up after that to lay the basketball floor down and get everything set up. Genius planning on their part. Then again, knowing the history of gross mismanagement by the Wizards Bullets franchise, not realizing any of this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. So what I'm getting at is that they had it in their authority and in their discretion to move the game further back. The Kings' next game was not until Tuesday, January 19th, so there wasn't a traveling issue with a back-to-back to worry about with the road team. And the Bullets' next game was on the road in Chicago, so not super far flight-wise, especially seeing as back-to-backs on the road with night games were incredibly common back then, and still are to some extent today. So a home and a road back-to-back, no big deal. This is not like the situation involving the New Jersey Nets that I talked about a few weeks ago, and their conflict with the New York Jets, where there wasn't a ton of flexibility. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. The Bullets had the upper hand. They had priority. If they wanted to move the game to 7 o'clock that night, they easily could have done so. But call it hubris or delusion, but whatever you want to call it, the Bullets said no. Because in their mind, the NFC Championship and the local team playing in it, not a threat whatsoever. It makes no difference. People having to choose between the NFL and the NBA, instead of just having to choose the NBA for their sports entertainment dollar and attention, was not a big deal, and was a risk that the Bullets were willing to take. Said Garnett Slayton, the executive vice president for the Bullets, nobody expected the Redskins to be there. It's a risk we took. Frankly, with Sacramento, it doesn't matter when you play. We would get the same crowd whether it was a weekend or a weeknight. That's right, it doesn't matter when this game is held. The attendance going up against the NFC Championship, it made no difference whatsoever. Whether his statement about a weeknight or a weekend would draw the same crowd is true or not, I'm not sure, because that's purely speculative. But that's not the two options on the table here. The two options are a Sunday game with nothing else on, or a Sunday game where this game right here is taking place in your own backyard for a trip to the Super Bowl. How dense and stupid can you be? It's very different. It's like saying that I'm going to throw a birthday party on my actual birthday, and it doesn't matter whether my birthday is on a weekday or a weekend, because I expect the same number of people to show up. However, it doesn't take into account the fact that this year, my birthday is on Thanksgiving. Like, that's a pretty big scheduling conflict and a pretty big detail that we're just conveniently deciding not to take into account. Also, I love how Slayton said that no one expected the Redskins to be there. While that might be true, even if they were a mainstay throughout the entire 1980s under Joe Gibbs, it's not like this was a last-second thing. They didn't win on Saturday night. The Bullets knew for a week that this was going to be a conflict. The last game was January 10th. They easily could have moved the game to avoid going up against this NFC Championship right here. The fact that they didn't and just shrugged and threw their hands up and said, well, there's nothing we can do, or they convinced themselves through their delusions that attendance would not be impacted by this, even though it was two teams with a combined record of 20-45 going up against the freaking NFC Championship, is astounding to me. Truly astounding. Which raises the ultimate question. Did this gamble pay off? Did the Bullets scheduling a game against the NFC Championship result in the Bullets drawing a great crowd? Well, amazingly enough, they were right. It made no difference. The Bullets drew incredibly well that Sunday, and the team that averaged about 11,000 fans per game drew above average on this day, drawing 13,863 fans as their team won by 17 points to improve to 12-20. I guess Slayton was right, and I was wrong. This is why you have a good market research team, and you plan these things out, and you weigh the pros and cons. It was a joyous occasion when the near sold-out Capitol Center found out that just a few miles away, their NFL team was going to the Super Bowl. And it was a memorable... Wait, hold on, I'm being told something by my editor. Give me a second, guys. Oh, come on. I don't have all day. What are you telling me here? Wait, what? I have my facts wrong here? That's not the right figure? You're sure about this? You're sure that's not the right number? Okay. I'll re-record. I'll let them know. Okay, guys, slight change of plans. Turns out, I added a number that shouldn't have been there. You know how I said that there were 13,863 fans? Turns out, I added the 1. It wasn't 13,863 fans. It was, and get ready for this, 3,863. Not even 4,000 fans showed up for this NBA game. Because of course not. An NBA game drawing under 4,000 spectators is laughably bad. The arena was a ghost town. You know what the arenas look like during the COVID games where they start allowing fans in the stands for the games with reduced capacity? You know those arenas looked very, very empty and there were empty seats galore? Yeah, that was what the arena looked like here. For some perspective on just how bad that number is, because trust me folks, it's bad. Here's a chart of all the games played by the Bullets at home during that 1987-88 season. See that red bar at the bottom? That small looking bar? That was their attendance during the game against the Kings that went directly up against the NFC Championship. The only game even remotely close to that in attendance, their January 25th game against the 76ers, was that low because there was a winter storm that kept people inside. Usually against the Sixers, they drew well into the 5 figures. For some more perspective on how bad that number is, of the hundreds upon hundreds of NBA games played when the calendar flipped over to 1988 in that 1987-88 season, this was, by a fair amount I might add, the lowest attended game of the year. So for the final 4 months of the year, not a single game drew even remotely comparable numbers to the Bullets Kings game. You know, there are some bad ideas that are bad the moment that they were conceived, and to the shock of no one, they remain bad ideas? Turns out, this was a really freaking bad idea. I should note when it came to the game between these two teams behind me right here, that for the 2024-25 NBA season, there's only one game that's even taking place on Conference Championship Sunday, and that is the battle between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Portland Trail Blazers, two markets that do not have NFL teams. The game is being held in Portland, a city that is 2 time zones away from the closest team in a conference championship. So there's no real issues there whatsoever. It is not like the Bullets fiasco during the 1987-88 season going up against that NFC Championship. As much as the NBA doesn't want to admit it necessarily, they recognize that the NFL is the king, and that any attempts to counter-program against the NFL will go pretty badly. But 40 years ago, even if it was very obvious to anyone with half a brain, when it came to the Washington Bullets, that was not the case. So as a word to the wise, for anyone around the NBA, or any other sporting league for that matter who might be watching this video, if you have 2 options to schedule a game, and one of them does not involve going up against the conference championship being held in your own backyard, then pick that option. For the love of God, pick that option. Do not entertain the second option, just pick that one and go with it. Do not schedule a Philadelphia 76ers game going up against the Philadelphia Eagles Conference Championship at the Lane. Do not schedule a New Orleans Pelicans game going up against a New Orleans Saints game that's a conference championship at the Superdome. And do not do what the Washington Bullets did here and be that stubborn and that stupid to go up against the NFC Championship. Unless you want your arena to look like a freaking ghost town, it's going to backfire on you badly. Because on this day in January of 1988, the Washington Bullets took a shot to their attendance. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.